The stagecoach lurched violently as it hit another rut in the dusty trail, sending Clara Whitmore sliding across the wooden bench. She gripped her worn leather satchel tighter, feeling the weight of her teaching certificates and the few precious books she'd brought from Boston. The Arizona Territory stretched endlessly before them, a harsh landscape of red rock, thorny cacti, and shimmering heat that made her modest traveling dress cling uncomfortably to her skin. "First time in the territories, miss?" asked the grizzled driver through the small window behind his seat. "Yes," Clara replied, her voice steady despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. "I've come to establish a school in Willow Creek." The driver spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Brave of you, considering these parts ain't exactly friendly to schoolmarms, especially not with the Apache still raidin' when they please." Clara had heard the warnings back east, but her determination hadn't wavered. At 23, she'd already spent 2 years teaching in Boston's poorest districts. The frontier children deserved education too. Savage land or not, she adjusted her simple straw bonnet and tried to ignore how the other passengers, 2 merchants and a cavalry sergeant, kept glancing at her with mixtures of pity and disbelief. The sun climbed higher, transforming the stagecoach into an oven. Through the window, Clara watched hawks circle lazily above the mesas. The landscape was both terrifying and magnificent, nothing like the gentle hills of Massachusetts. Here, the earth seemed to have been carved by some ancient, violent force, leaving behind formations that looked like the ruins of giants' castles. They'd been traveling for 3 days since leaving Fort Buchanan, stopping only at way stations that were little more than adobe huts surrounded by wooden palisades. Each night, Clara had lain awake listening to coyotes howl and wondering what she'd gotten herself into. But each morning, she'd risen with renewed purpose. These children needed her. "Riders approaching!" the shotgun messenger suddenly called out. Clara's blood chilled as she saw a dust cloud rising from the south. The sergeant immediately checked his revolver while the merchants began muttering prayers. "How many?" the driver shouted. "Can't tell. Could be." The attack came without warning. Gunfire erupted from the rocks above them, and the stagecoach horses screamed in terror. Clara was thrown to the floor as the vehicle careened wildly off the trail. Through the chaos of shouts and gunshots, she heard Spanish mixed with English, banditos, not Apache as they'd feared. "Everyone out! Take cover!" the sergeant roared. Clara stumbled from the coach, her ears ringing from the gunfire. The bandits, perhaps a dozen men, were descending from their hiding spots among the rocks. The shotgun messenger was already down, clutching his shoulder. The driver fired his rifle from behind the overturned water barrel. Clara pressed herself against the coach wheel, her heart hammering. 20 yards away, she spotted movement in a cluster of mesquite bushes. A man lay there, blood soaking through his shirt. Not one of their party. His skin was deep bronze, his hair long and black. An Apache warrior. From the looks of his buckskin leggings and the knife at his belt, their eyes met across the distance. His were dark as obsidian, filled with pain but also a fierce pride that even approaching death couldn't dim. He was trying to reach for something, a rifle that had fallen just beyond his grasp. Clara didn't think. As bullets whined overhead and men shouted in 3 languages, she crawled toward the wounded man. Some instinct deeper than fear drove her forward. Perhaps it was her teacher's nature, unable to see suffering without trying to help. Perhaps it was something else. "What are you doing, you fool woman?" the sergeant bellowed. But Clara was already halfway there. She reached the Apache warrior just as a bandit noticed them. The Mexican raised his pistol, aiming at the wounded man. Without thinking, Clara threw herself over the warrior's body. The bullet meant for him tore through her sleeve, burning a line across her upper arm. The warrior's eyes widened in shock. His hand found hers, gripping with surprising strength. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. They stared at each other, 2 strangers from different worlds, bound by this single act of inexplicable salvation. Then chaos crashed back over them. The cavalry from Fort Buchanan had been trailing the stage as escort, and now they charged into the fray. The bandits, caught between the soldiers and the defenders, began to flee. In minutes, It was over. The dust settled, revealing the carnage. "Clara, Miss Whitmore." The sergeant was beside her, pulling her away from the wounded Apache. "Are you hurt?" "My arm," she gasped, suddenly feeling the pain. "But he's worse. He needs help." The sergeant's face darkened. "That's an Apache. Miss, probably scouting for a raid his own self. Leave him." "He's a human being," Clara protested. But the sergeant was already dragging her back toward the coach. The other survivors were gathering themselves. The driver had taken a bullet to the leg but would live. One merchant had fled into the desert during the fight and was being retrieved by the soldiers. They'd lost the shotgun messenger and 3 horses. "We're heading back to Fort Buchanan," the cavalry lieutenant announced. "This coach ain't going nowhere, and we've got wounded." As they prepared to leave, Clara looked back at the mesquite bushes. The Apache warrior was gone. Only a dark stain on the sand showed where he'd lain. How had he moved with such injuries? Where had he gone? That night, they made camp in a box canyon. Clara's arm had been bandaged, the wound thankfully shallow. She sat apart from the others, staring into the fire and replaying the day's events. The warrior's eyes haunted her, so fierce, so proud, yet holding something else when he'd looked at her. Surprise? Gratitude? She couldn't say. "You're lucky to be alive," the lieutenant said, sitting beside her. "What possessed you to try saving an Apache?" Clara considered the question. "I don't know. I saw a wounded man, and I acted. Does it matter what race he was?" The lieutenant snorted. "Out here? Yes, miss, it matters a great deal. You'll learn that if you stay." But Clara was no longer listening. At the edge of the firelight, she could have sworn she saw movement, a shadow among shadows, watching. When she blinked, it was gone. 3 days later, they reached Fort Buchanan. Clara was treated like a hero and a fool in equal measure. The fort's doctor cleaned and rebandaged her wound. Tisking at her recklessness, plans were made to send her back east on the next supply wagon. "I'm not going back," Clara insisted to the fort commander. "I came here to teach, and that's what I intend to do." But her protests fell on deaf ears. That night, confined to quarters for her own safety, Clara sat by her small window watching the desert moon rise. She was thinking of those dark eyes, of the strength in that grip. When she heard it, a low whistle, like a night bird, but not quite. She looked out and gasped. There, standing in the moonlight beyond the fort walls, was the Apache warrior. He stood straight despite what must have been terrible wounds, his face painted with symbols she couldn't read. He raised one hand to her, then spoke in accented but clear English. "You saved my life. By the old laws of my people, this creates a bond that cannot be broken." His voice carried across the distance, deep and certain. "The spirits have spoken. You must become my wife." Clara's world tilted. She gripped the window frame, unable to speak. "I am called Taza of the Red Hawk clan," he continued. "I will return for you when the moon is new. Be ready." Then he melted back into the darkness, leaving Clara staring at empty desert. Her rational mind screamed that this was impossible, that she must be fevered from her wound. But her heart, her traitorous heart, was already racing with something that might have been fear, but felt dangerously like anticipation. She touched her bandaged arm where the bullet had grazed her. In saving a stranger's life, what had she set in motion? And why? Despite everything her proper Boston upbringing told her, did part of her want to find out? The desert wind moaned through the fort's walls, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Somewhere in that vast darkness, an Apache warrior was riding away, carrying with him a declaration that would change everything. Clara Whitmore, proper schoolteacher from Boston, had come to teach children their letters. Instead, she'd stumbled into a destiny written in ancient laws and sealed with blood under the harsh Arizona sun. The new moon came too quickly. Clara had spent 2 weeks at Fort Buchanan, her protests about continuing to Willow Creek falling on deaf ears. The commander insisted on keeping her until a proper military escort could be arranged. But on the night when the moon disappeared from the sky, Clara found herself wide awake, listening to every sound beyond the fort walls. She'd nearly convinced herself that the Apache warrior, Taza, had been a fever dream when she heard it, the soft scrape of moccasins on adobe. Her window darkened as a figure appeared outside. "Come," Taza said simply. "It is time." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Clara whispered fiercely, though her hands trembled. "This is madness. You saved my life. The debt must be honored." His voice held no room for argument. "The soldiers sleep. Their sentries look outward, not within. Come now, or I will come for you." Clara's mind raced. She could scream, raise the alarm, but something in his manner, patient yet implacable, told her he would simply return another night, and another, until she yielded. "If I come with you," she said slowly, "will you give me your word that no harm will come to me? In the darkness," she saw him nod, "you will be treated as befits one who saved a warrior's life. This I swear by the mountains themselves." Perhaps it was exhaustion, or the strange unreality of the past weeks. But Clara found herself pulling on her traveling cloak. She took nothing but the clothes she wore and her mother's Bible, tucked inside her bodice. As she climbed through the window, Taza's strong hands caught her, lowering her silently to the ground. They moved like shadows through the fort. Clara's heart hammered so loudly she was certain the entire garrison must hear it. But Taza led her with the sureness of a man who'd done this before. Within minutes, they were beyond the walls, where two horses waited. "Can you ride?" he asked. "A little," Clara admitted. Back in Boston, she'd ridden sedately through parks. This would be different. He lifted her onto a painted pony with surprising gentleness, then vaulted onto his own mount. "Follow close. We ride hard until dawn." The journey was a nightmare of endurance. They rode through arroyos and over mesas, following paths Clara couldn't see in the darkness. Her legs ached, her back screamed. But Taza never slowed. Only when the eastern sky began to lighten did he finally stop at a hidden spring among red rocks. Clara half fell from her horse, legs buckling. Taza caught her arm, steadying her. In the growing light, she got her first clear look at him. He was younger than she'd thought, perhaps 30 summers. His face was angular and proud, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw. The wounds from the bandit attack were still visible, bandaged with some kind of plant material. "Drink," he said, offering her a water gourd. Clara drank gratefully, then found her voice. "This is kidnapping. They'll come for me." "Let them come," he shrugged. "They will not find you. My people know every stone, every trail. The white soldiers blunder like blind bears." "Your people," Clara repeated. "You're taking me to your village." "To my clan, yes, where the elders will speak the words to make you my wife." "I won't agree to it," she said firmly. "You can't force me to marry you." For the first time, she saw him smile, a quick flash that transformed his stern features. "You already agreed when you covered my body with yours. Actions speak louder than words. White woman, you chose me in that moment." They rode through the day, stopping only to rest the horses. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the landscape changed from desert to pine forest. Clara had never seen such wild beauty, or felt so utterly lost. Every mile took her further from civilization, from any hope of rescue. As sunset approached, they crested a ridge and Clara gasped. Below lay a hidden valley, sheltered by towering red cliffs. Perhaps 50 wickiups, dome-shaped dwellings covered in hides, clustered near a stream. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and she could see people moving about their evening tasks. Their arrival caused a sensation. Women and children emerged from the wickiups, staring at Clara with mixtures of curiosity and suspicion. Warriors appeared as if from nowhere, surrounding them. Harsh words in Apache flew back and forth. Clara couldn't understand, but she recognized anger in several voices. An elderly man approached, his face deeply lined, but his bearing still straight. He wore a blanket decorated with intricate beadwork and carried a staff topped with feathers. The crowd fell silent as he spoke with Taza in measured tones. Finally, Taza turned to Clara. This is Joseph Crowfeather, our elder. He asks if it is true. Did you save my life?" Clara lifted her chin. "Yes, though I'm beginning to regret it." The elder studied her for a long moment, then spoke again. Taza translated. "He says the old law is clear. A woman who saves a warrior's life in battle becomes bound to him. So that his spirit debt may be repaid through protection and provision, you must become my wife. And if I refuse," another exchange in Apache, "then my spirit remains unbalanced. I cannot rest, cannot war, cannot hunt. I become as a ghost walking." Taza's face was grave. "This is why you must accept. Not for me alone, but for the harmony of all things." Clara felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. I need time to think." The elder nodded as if he'd expected this. He spoke to two women, who came forward reluctantly. They led Clara to a small wickiup at the edge of the encampment. Inside, she found buffalo robes, a water jug, and a bowl of something that might have been stew. "You stay here," one of the women said in broken English. "Not prisoner, guest, but not leave." As darkness fell, Clara sat alone in the strange dwelling, listening to the sounds of the Apache village. Somewhere, a flute played a haunting melody. Children laughed. A baby cried and was quickly soothed. It was so normal, so human, that tears suddenly stung her eyes. These weren't the savage monsters of frontier legend. They were people, living their lives according to their own ways. She must have dozed, because she woke to find Taza sitting across from her, a small fire burning between them. He'd brought more food, flatbread and dried meat. "You should eat," he said. Clara accepted the food, studying him in the firelight. "Why didn't you simply let me go? I saved your life. Surely that releases you from any obligation." "You don't understand." He stared into the flames. "My wife died 2 winters ago. Soldiers attacked our winter camp. She was carrying our child." His voice remained steady, but she saw his hands clench. "I was ready to follow her to the spirit world. Then you appeared, a white woman, enemy of my people, and gave me back my life. The spirits speak clearly in such things. I'm sorry for your loss." Clara said softly, "But I can't be a replacement for your wife. I'm not Apache. I don't know your ways." "You will learn." He looked at her directly. "You have courage. I saw it when you crawled through bullets to reach me. That is what matters." They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Clara asked, "What would this marriage mean, if I agreed?" "You would share my wickiup, bear my children, learn our ways." He paused. "I would protect you, provide for you. You would want for nothing. And could I still teach? The children, I mean, could I teach them to read and write English?" His brow furrowed. "Why would you want this?" "Because it's who I am." Clara said firmly, "I came here to be a teacher. If I'm to stay, I must have purpose beyond being someone's wife." He considered this for a long moment. "I will speak with Crowfeather. Perhaps it would be good. The world changes. Maybe our children need to know the white man's marks on paper." Clara felt a flutter of hope. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but perhaps, "I need more time," she said. Taza nodded and rose gracefully. "The ceremony cannot happen until the full moon anyway. That gives you 12 days. He paused at the entrance. "You are not prisoner here. Clara Whitmore. But the desert is harsh to those who don't know its ways. Do not try to leave." After he left, Clara lay on the buffalo robes, staring up through the smoke hole at the stars. Somewhere out there, the fort was probably organizing search parties. Her fellow teachers in Boston would be scandalized. Everything she'd been raised to believe told her this was wrong, impossible. But under the vast Apache sky, those distant voices seemed very faint, and when she finally slept, she dreamed not of escape, but of dark eyes filled with pain and pride, and strong hands reaching for hers across an impossible divide. The fever came on her 4th night in the Apache camp. Clara woke shivering despite the warm evening, her skin burning and clammy. She tried to rise, but the world spun violently, sending her crashing back onto the buffalo robes. Through her delirium, She heard voices speaking rapid Apache, the woman who brought her meals. Mourning dove. She'd learned, placed a cool hand on Clara's forehead and made a distressed sound. More voices, footsteps, and then suddenly Taza was there, his face tight with concern. "The white woman's sickness," someone said in English. "She will die." "No." Taza's voice was firm. "Bring the medicine woman." Clara drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she was back in Boston, her mother singing lullabies. Sometimes she was in the stagecoach again, bullets flying. But always, when she surfaced from the dreams, Taza was there. His presence was a constant, a solid anchor in her sea of confusion. She felt him lift her head, spooning bitter liquid between her lips. Heard him speaking in low tones, sometimes in Apache, sometimes in English. "Fight, Clara. You are stronger than this. I have seen your courage." The fever raged for 2 days. Clara was dimly aware of being bathed with cool water, of sage smoke filling the wickiup, of chanting that seemed to reach into her very bones. But what she remembered most clearly was the third night, when the fever finally peaked. She woke to find herself cradled against Taza's chest, his arms wrapped around her trembling form. He'd removed his shirt, and her cheek rested against his bare skin. His warmth seemed to seep into her chilled body, driving back the cold that threatened to claim her. "Why?" she whispered through chattering teeth. "Skin to skin," he murmured. "It is how we warm our children when winter comes too hard. Rest now." Clara should have protested. Every rule of propriety demanded it. But she was so cold, and he was so warm, and his heartbeat was steady beneath her ear. She pressed closer, feeling his arms tighten protectively around her. "My mother died of fever," she heard herself say. "I was 12. She grew cold at the end. So cold. You will not die." His voice rumbled through his chest. "I will not allow it." "Arrogant?" she mumbled, but there was no heat in it. She felt rather than heard his quiet laugh. "Perhaps, but I did not save you from bandits to lose you to sickness." "You didn't save me. I saved you." "Then we are even." Sometime during the night, the fever broke. Clara woke drenched in sweat but clear-headed, still held securely in Taza's embrace. Morning light filtered through the smoke hole. She should move away, she knew, but for just a moment longer. She allowed herself to rest there, safe and warm. When she finally stirred, Taza released her immediately. He helped her sit up, then offered water from a gourd. His face showed the strain of sleepless nights, but his dark eyes held something new when he looked at her, a tenderness that made her breath catch. "The sickness has passed," he said. "You will recover now." "Thank you," Clara said softly, "for taking care of me." He nodded and rose to leave, but paused at the entrance. "Morning dove will bring you food. Rest today. Tomorrow, if you are strong enough, I will show you our village properly." The recovery was slow but steady. Morning dove, who Clara learned was Taza's cousin, tended her with gruff kindness. The medicine woman, ancient and sharp-eyed, came daily to check on her progress, nodding approval as Clara's strength returned. On the 7th day, Taza kept his promise. He led her through the village, introducing her formally to his clan. Clara was surprised to find that many Apaches spoke at least some English, learned from trading with settlers before the recent escalation of hostilities. "This is where we teach the young ones," Taza said, showing her a cleared area where children practiced with small bows. "They learn hunting, tracking, the stories of our people." Clara watched the children, bright-eyed and laughing, so like her students in Boston despite the different setting. Would it be possible for me to teach them letters here, reading?" Taza spoke with an older woman who seemed to be in charge of the children. After a lengthy discussion, he turned back to Clara. "She says you may try, but you must also learn from her, our ways, our stories. Teaching goes both directions." "Of course." Clara agreed eagerly. The next morning, she gathered the children using a stick to draw letters in the dirt. At first, they were skeptical, giggling at her clumsy attempts at Apache words. But when she began to show them how marks could represent sounds, how sounds built words, their natural curiosity took over. One boy, Little Fox, about 8 years old, was particularly quick. He mastered the alphabet in just 3 days and was soon helping her teach the others. His mother, watching from nearby, spoke to Clara in careful English. "You give him power," she said. "The power to speak with marks, like white men do. Maybe this is good. Maybe our children need this power for what comes." Clara felt the weight of that trust. She wasn't just teaching letters. She was offering tools for survival in a changing world. The responsibility both thrilled and terrified her. In the evenings, Taza would find her by the teaching circle, often bringing food to share. Their conversations grew easier, deeper. He told her about Apache beliefs, how the earth was mother to all, how every rock and tree held spirit. She told him about Boston, about books and theaters and gas streetlights that turned night into day. "Do you miss it?" he asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the cliffs crimson. "Your old life," Clara considered. "Sometimes I miss my books most of all. But," she gestured at the wild beauty around them, "this place has its own magic, and the children, they're so eager to learn. In Boston, many of my students were too tired from factory work to care about letters. No factories here," Taza said with satisfaction. "Our children learn to live, not just survive." They sat in comfortable silence until the first stars appeared. Then Taza spoke again, his voice careful. "The full moon comes in 5 days." Clara's stomach fluttered. She'd almost forgotten the deadline and the rhythm of daily life. "I know. Have you decided?" She turned to look at him, this man who'd cared for her in sickness, who'd given her purpose in his village, who spoke with her as an equal despite their different worlds. "What happens if I say no? Truthfully?" His jaw tightened. "I would take you back to the fort, but I could never take another wife. My spirit would remain unbalanced. I would be," he searched for words, "less than whole." "That's not fair," Clara protested. "To put that burden on me. Life is not fair." He looked at her directly. "But I will not force you. The choice must be yours. Freely made." That night, Clara lay wakeful on her buffalo robes. Through the Wikiup's entrance, she could see Taza's dwelling across the camp. He often sat outside in the evenings, working on arrows or simply watching the stars. She'd grown accustomed to checking for his presence, finding comfort in knowing he was near. Could she do this? Bind herself to a man from another world? Give up any chance of the life she'd planned? But then she thought of Little Fox writing his name in the dirt with such pride, of Morning Dove teaching her to grind corn while sharing gossip about the camp, of the medicine woman nodding approval as Clara learned to identify healing plants, of Taza's arms around her in the fever night, holding her to life with pure will. Perhaps home wasn't a place but a choice. Perhaps belonging wasn't about blood but about commitment. As she finally drifted toward sleep, Clara realized she'd already made her decision. It had been made in small moments, a shared smile over a child's success, a quiet evening watching stars, strong arms holding her through the darkness. The full moon would only make official what her heart already knew. She was no longer the proper Boston schoolteacher who'd boarded a stagecoach bound for Willow Creek. That woman had been left somewhere in the desert between gunfire and grace. In her place was someone new, still Clara, but changed. Someone who could bridge 2 worlds, who could find purpose in teaching Apache children their letters while learning their sacred stories in return. Someone who could love where love was least expected. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, for the first time since arriving in the camp, Clara felt truly at peace. The night of the full moon arrived with unusual clarity. Clara stood at the entrance of her Wikiup, watching the silver orb rise above the red cliffs. The camp buzzed with preparation, women preparing ceremonial foods, men painting their faces, children running excitedly between the dwellings despite the late hour. Morning Dove appeared with a bundle of clothing. "For you," she said simply. "Cannot marry in white woman's dress." Clara accepted the soft doe-skin dress, decorated with intricate beadwork and fringe. It was beautiful, clearly made with care. "Thank you," she said, touched by the gesture. As she changed, her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, she realized, but from anticipation. When had her feelings shifted so completely? When had duty become desire? Taza came for her as the moon reached its zenith. He wore his finest clothing, a shirt decorated with quill work, leggings with geometric designs, his long hair adorned with eagle feathers. In the moonlight, he looked like something from another time, ancient and powerful. "You are ready?" he asked, his voice gentle. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. He held out his hand, and she took it, feeling the calluses from years of bow and rifle, the strength tempered with surprising tenderness. But instead of leading her to the ceremonial circle where the tribe had gathered, Taza guided her toward a narrow path leading up the cliff face. "Where are we going?" Clara asked. "There is something you must see first. Before you choose, finally." They climbed in silence, the path steep but well-worn. Clara was grateful for the moccasins Mourning Dove had given her. They gripped the stone far better than her Boston shoes would have. Above them, the stars blazed with intensity, impossible in city skies. Finally, they emerged onto a flat mesa top. The view took Clara's breath away. The entire valley spread below them, silver in the moonlight. Beyond, mountains rose in waves, extending to the horizon. The world seemed infinite, untamed, magnificent. "This is the place of visions," Taza said, "where young men come to seek their spirit guides, where warriors come to think before battle, where souls come to touch the sky." He led her to a flat stone near the edge, sitting cross-legged and motioning for her to join him. For a long moment, they simply sat, breathing the thin mountain air, existing in the vast silence. "My wife, Singing River, I brought her here the night before our marriage," Taza said finally. "She was afraid, like you. Her family had chosen me, but her heart was uncertain. Here, under the eyes of all creation, we spoke truth." What did she say? That she feared losing herself in marriage, that she had dreams beyond bearing children and tending fires. He smiled at the memory. "I told her that I did not want a shadow following me, but a companion walking beside me, that her dreams would become my dreams. And did they? She became our greatest horse trainer. Warriors came from other bands to trade for horses she had gentled. She bore our children, yes, but she also rode to battle when needed, advised in council when wisdom was required. She was fully herself, and fully my wife. Both, not choosing between." Clara felt tears sting her eyes. "She sounds remarkable." "As are you." Taza turned to face her directly. "Clara Whitmore, you came to teach children. You still can. You saved my life from duty and instinct, but what comes next must be from choice. So I ask you here, where only the spirits witness, what does your heart say?" Clara looked out over the vast landscape, then back at the man beside her. In the moonlight, she could see vulnerability beneath his warrior's bearing. He was offering not just marriage, but partnership. Not just protection, but respect. "My heart says that I've been fighting against something that was meant to be," she said softly. "That in saving your life, I somehow found my own. That the children need their teacher, and—" She took a breath. "And I need you." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, joy, desire, all mingled together. He lifted his hand to her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "Clara," he said, her name a prayer on his lips. She leaned into his touch, her own hand coming up to cover his. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you. Not from obligation or ancient law, but because I choose you. Because somewhere between the bullets and the fever and the teaching circle, I fell in love with you." His kiss was like the desert storm, sudden, overwhelming, transformative. Clara had been kissed before, chased pecks from proper Boston suitors. This was different. This was claiming and surrendering. Question and answer, past and future colliding in the present moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Taza rested his forehead against hers. "My heart sings," he said simply. They stayed on the mesa for another hour, talking of dreams and plans. Clara would continue teaching the children, but also learn the women's arts, weaving, plant medicine, the stories that held the tribe's history. Taza would teach her to ride properly, to read the land signs, to survive in this harsh, beautiful country. And children? Clara asked, blushing. Do you want more children? When the spirits will it, he said. Yeah. But there is no hurry. We have time to know each other first, to build our foundation strong. When they finally descended to the village, the ceremony was simple but profound. Crow Feather spoke words in Apache that Taza translated, about two paths becoming one, about strength in unity, about the sacred bond between souls. Clara and Taza drank from the same cup, ate from the same bowl, had their wrists bound together with a cord of braided sweetgrass. The tribe sang songs that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Women ululated their approval. Men drummed rhythms that echoed heartbeats. And through it all, Clara kept her eyes on Taza's, seeing her future reflected in their dark depths. When the ceremony ended, Taza led her to his wickiup, their wickiup now. Inside, he had prepared a new sleeping area, fresh buffalo robes laid over sweet pine boughs. A small fire burned in the center, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Clara stood uncertainly near the entrance until Taza took her hands, drawing her deeper inside. You are my wife now, he said softly. This is your home. I hardly know how to be a wife, Clara admitted, especially an Apache wife. Then we will learn together. I hardly know how to be husband to a woman who speaks with paper and makes marks that hold words. He smiled. But we have already proven we can save each other. The rest will come. He began to remove the ceremonial feathers from his hair, and Clara found herself helping, running her fingers through the long, dark strands. Such intimacy should have felt wrong, but instead, it felt like coming home. When he kissed her again, it was different from the mesa, slower, deeper, a careful exploration rather than a claiming. Clara felt herself melting into him, all her Boston propriety dissolving under the heat of his touch. When he began to unlace her doeskin dress, she didn't protest, only pulled him closer. That night, under buffalo robes with the fire burning low, Clara discovered that physical love could be both tender and wild, sacred and earthy, giving and receiving in equal measure. Taza was patient with her inexperience, teaching her pleasure as carefully as she taught letters, until she understood that this too was a language, one spoken in touch and breath, and the music two bodies could make together. Afterward, they lay entwined, Clara's head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. Through the smoke hole, she could see stars wheeling overhead, the same stars she'd watched from her narrow bed in Boston. But everything else had changed. No regrets? Taza asked, his voice rumbling beneath her ear. Clara thought of the life she'd planned, a neat schoolhouse, a respectable position, perhaps eventually a proper marriage to a proper man. Then she thought of Little Fox writing his name, of Mourning Dove's grudging smiles, of the wild beauty of this hidden valley, of the man holding her, who saw her as partner and equal, who'd given her purpose beyond her wildest dreams. No regrets, she said firmly. Only gratitude. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Sleep now. Wife, tomorrow brings new challenges. As Clara drifted toward sleep, safe in the circle of his arms, she thought how strange life's paths could be. She'd come west to teach, expecting nothing more than a simple schoolroom and willing students. Instead, she'd found a love that transcended cultures, a purpose that bridged worlds, and a home in the last place she'd ever thought to look for it. The moon continued its journey across the sky, blessing the union of two souls who'd found each other across an impossible divide. And in a wickiup in a hidden valley, Clara Whitmore, now Clara Redhawk, slept peacefully in her husband's arms, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. The morning sun had barely crested the canyon walls when Clara heard the commotion. Angry voices rose from the center of the village, disrupting the usual peaceful dawn routines. She emerged from the wickiup to find a crowd gathering, the tension palpable in the air. Taza appeared at her side, his face grim. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. At the center of the disturbance stood 3 Apache warriors Clara recognized as members of the Warrior Society. Young men who'd lost family to white soldiers and harbored deep resentment toward all whites. Their leader, a fierce warrior named Black Wolf, was speaking rapidly to Crow Feather, gesturing angrily in Clara's direction. "What's happening?" Clara whispered. "They say the white soldiers are offering rifles and ammunition in trade for you," Taza explained, his jaw tight. "Black Wolf argues we should accept, that one white woman's life could arm us for many battles." Clara's blood chilled. She'd known not everyone in the village accepted her presence, but this... Crow Feather raised his hand for silence, then spoke in measured tones. The crowd listened intently, some nodding, others frowning. When he finished, Black Wolf spat on the ground and responded harshly. "He says Crow Feather grows soft." Taza translated, "That the old ways are dying because we coddle our enemies instead of fighting them." More arguments erupted. Clara noticed the village was dividing. The younger warriors sided with Black Wolf, while the elders and many of the women supported Crow Feather. Her students huddled near their mothers, Little Fox catching her eye with a worried expression. Suddenly, Black Wolf strode toward them, his hand on his knife. Taza stepped forward, placing himself between the warrior and Clara. "Move aside, Taza," Black Wolf said in English for Clara's benefit. "Your mind is clouded by this white witch. She weakens us all. She is my wife," Taza said evenly. "Touch her, and we will have blood between us." "Better blood between us than chains on our children's wrists," Black Wolf snarled. "How many rifles would the whites trade for her? 20, 30. Think of our people, not your bed." The insult hung in the air. Clara saw Taza's hand move toward his own blade, and without thinking, she stepped around him. "Wait," she said, addressing Black Wolf directly. "You think I weaken your people? Then test me." Black Wolf laughed harshly. "Test a white woman? You would faint at the first challenge. Then you have nothing to lose." Clara replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "If I fail, I'll write a letter to the fort myself, telling them I'm well and to stop searching. That should lower my value considerably. But if I succeed, you stop this talk of trading me." The warrior's eyes narrowed. What test? Clara's mind raced. It had to be something that would prove her commitment, her strength, her value to the tribe beyond mere trade goods. Then she remembered something Morning Dove had mentioned, a grueling ritual the women underwent to prove their readiness for the hardships of Apache life. "The women's endurance trial," she said. "The path to Eagle's Nest and back, carrying water without spilling a drop." Shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eagle's Nest was a sacred site high in the mountains, reached by treacherous paths. The trial was reserved for young Apache women coming of age, and many failed it. Black Wolf's expression shifted from contempt to surprise, then calculation. "You would die on those paths, white woman. Then your problem solves itself." Clara said, "No." Taza's voice was sharp with fear. "Clara, you don't understand. The trial is—" "I understand enough," she interrupted gently, touching his arm. "Trust me." Crow Feather had been watching silently. Now he spoke, his words carrying the weight of decision. Black Wolf argued, but the elder was firm. Finally, the warrior threw up his hands in disgust. "Dawn tomorrow," he said to Clara. "When you fail, we revisit the trade." He stalked away, his followers trailing behind. As the crowd dispersed, Taza gripped Clara's shoulders. "Why did you do that? The trial is dangerous. Women train for months." "Because running or hiding would only prove them right." Clara said, "I need to show them I'm not just a burden to be protected or a prize to be traded. I need to earn my place." That day was spent in preparation. Morning Dove, her usual gruffness replaced by concern, showed Clara how to balance the water jug on her head, how to place her feet on rough terrain. The medicine woman provided herbs to chew for endurance. Even some of the women who'd been suspicious of Clara came forward with advice. As night fell, Clara sat with Taza by their fire. He'd been quiet all day, but now he spoke, I could forbid this, as your husband, but you won't, Clara said softly. Because you understand why I need to do it, he sighed, pulling her against him. You are too brave for your own good. I learned from watching a certain warrior, she replied. Someone who faced down bandits while wounded, who came to a fort full of soldiers who would have shot him on sight, all for a promise. They spent the night holding each other, not speaking of the morning. When dawn came, Clara rose and dressed in the simple shift and moccasins provided for the trial. The entire village gathered at the trailhead, even Black Wolf's faction watching with interest. The medicine woman placed the sacred water jug on Clara's head, pottery decorated with symbols of strength and endurance, filled to the brim with precious water. One drop spilled would mean failure. The path is marked with white stones. Mourning Dove instructed, "Do not leave it. No matter what you see or hear, reach Eagle's Nest. Touch the prayer tree. Return. The spirits will test you. Do not listen to their lies." Clara nodded carefully, feeling the jug's weight. Taza caught her eye, his face tight with worry, but also pride. She gave him a small smile, then began walking. The first hour was manageable. The path wound upward gradually, and Clara focused on keeping her movements smooth. The jug was heavy but balanced. She found a rhythm. Step, breathe, step, breathe. That seemed sustainable. Then the real climb began. The path became steep, sometimes barely wider than her feet. Loose stones shifted treacherously. The morning sun grew hot, and sweat began to trickle down her back. The jug seemed to grow heavier with each step. By midday, her neck and shoulders screamed in agony. Her legs trembled with each placement. The path wound along cliff edges where one wrong step meant death. But Clara pressed on, thinking of Little Fox's eager face, of Mourning Dove's grudging respect, of Taza's faith in her. The spirits' tests came in the third hour. Exhaustion played tricks on her mind. She heard her father's voice calling from Boston, telling her to come home. She saw phantom soldiers on the ridge, beckoning her to safety. Once, she could have sworn she saw her mother standing beside the path, arms outstretched. "Not real," Clara whispered through cracked lips. "Keep walking." The worst moment came when the path narrowed to a ledge barely 6 inches wide, with a sheer drop on one side. Clara's whole body shook with fatigue. The water sloshed dangerously in the jug. For a terrifying moment, she thought she would fall. Then she remembered Taza's words from their night on the mesa. "We have already proven we can save each other." She pressed her back against the cliff face and inched along, muscles screaming, until the path widened again. When she finally saw Eagle's Nest, a gnarled pine growing impossibly from the cliff face, its branches hung with prayer feathers, she nearly wept. She touched the sacred tree with trembling fingers, whispered a prayer of gratitude, then began the journey back. The descent was almost worse than the climb. Her legs felt like water, threatening to buckle with each step. The jug seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. The sun was setting when the village finally came into view. Clara could see the crowd gathered, waiting. Her vision blurred with exhaustion, but she forced herself to maintain the steady pace. Step, breathe, step, breathe. When she crossed the marked stones that indicated the trial's end, the medicine woman lifted the jug from her head. Not a single drop had spilled. Clara's legs gave out immediately. Taza caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest. Through her exhaustion, she heard the crowd's reaction, surprise, approval, even ululation from some of the women. Black Wolf stood apart, his expression unreadable. Finally, he stepped forward. "You have the heart of an Apache," he said grudgingly. "I was wrong. You are not a burden." He paused, then added, "But you are still a fool. White woman. Only a fool would risk so much to prove what your husband already knew." Despite everything, Clara found herself smiling. "Then I'm a fool who belongs here," she managed to say. That night, as Taza tended her blistered feet and aching muscles, Clara felt a shift in the village's atmosphere. Women who'd avoided her now nodded in greeting. Warriors who'd watched her suspiciously now showed grudging respect. Even Black Wolf, while not friendly, no longer radiated hostility. "You could have died today," Taza said softly, spreading healing salve on her blisters. "But I didn't," Clara replied. "And now they know I'm not just playing at being Apache. I'm committed to this life, to these people, to you." He kissed her gently. "I knew that already." "Yes, but now they know it too, and that matters." As she drifted off to sleep, muscles still aching but heart light, Clara thought about the strange path that had led her here. She'd come west to teach in a simple schoolhouse. Instead, she'd found herself carrying sacred water along cliff edges, proving herself worthy of a life she'd never imagined. Tomorrow, she would return to teaching the children, her position in the tribe now secure. Black Wolf and his followers might never fully accept her, but they would no longer actively oppose her. She'd earned her place through sweat and determination, through refusing to be seen as a victim or a prize. She was Clara Redhawk, teacher and wife, white by birth but Apache by choice, and she was exactly where she belonged. The dust cloud on the horizon appeared just after dawn, 3 weeks after Clara's trial. She was teaching the children their morning lessons when Little Fox pointed toward the valley entrance. "Riders coming, many riders." Clara's heart sank as she recognized the blue uniforms of the U.S. cavalry. The village erupted into controlled chaos, women gathering children, warriors taking defensive positions, elders calling for calm. Taza appeared at her side, his face carved from stone. "They've come for you," he said simply. "I won't go," Clara replied, but they both knew it wasn't that simple. The column approaching was at least 50 men strong, far more than the village's warriors could fight without devastating losses. Crowfeather called for the white flag of parley. As the soldiers drew closer, Clara recognized the man leading them, Colonel Marcus Webb, her father's old friend from the war. Her heart sank further. He wouldn't give up easily. The soldiers stopped just outside the village, weapons at ready but not aimed. Colonel Webb dismounted, his weathered face showing relief when he spotted Clara. "Miss Whitmore," he called out. "Thank God you're alive. Your father sent word to every fort in the territory. We've come to take you home." Clara stepped forward, aware of every eye upon her. "Colonel Webb, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not being held against my will. I've chosen to stay here." The colonel's eyes narrowed as he took in her Apache dress, her sun-darkened skin, the way she stood naturally beside Taza. "These savages have clearly influenced your thinking. My dear, come with us now, and we'll get you proper care." "I'm not going anywhere," Clara said firmly. "I've married according to Apache custom. This is my husband, Taza Redhawk, and this is my home." The soldiers muttered among themselves, disgust and disbelief on their faces. Colonel Webb's expression hardened. "Miss Whitmore, you're clearly not thinking rationally. These people have no legal authority to perform marriages. You'll come with us voluntarily, or I'll be forced to take you for your own protection." "And start a war." Taza spoke for the first time, his English clear and cold. "You take my wife by force. Every Apache band in the territory will know of it. The peace you've barely maintained will shatter. Don't threaten me, savage." Webb snapped. "I have 50 men, and I have the mountains." Taza interrupted. "Your 50 men would die chasing shadows through canyons they don't know. Their bodies would feed the buzzards before you reach the nearest fort." The tension ratcheted higher. Warriors notched arrows. Soldiers fingered their rifles. Clara knew she had seconds before violence erupted. "Colonel Webb," she said quickly, "might I speak with you privately? As my father's friend, you owe me that courtesy." The colonel hesitated, then nodded. They walked a short distance from both groups, though Clara was aware of Taza's watchful gaze following her. "Marcus," she said, using his first name as she had when she was a child. "I know this isn't what you expected to find, but I need you to listen, really listen." She told him everything: the attack, saving Taza, her illness, the trial, her teaching. She spoke of the children learning their letters, of the women who'd become her friends, of the life she'd built here. The colonel listened, his expression cycling through disbelief, disgust, and something that might have been pity. "They've corrupted you," he said when she finished. "Filled your head with their heathen nonsense. Your father would die if he knew." "My father is already dead to me," Clara said quietly. "He died the day he decided his reputation mattered more than his daughter's happiness. I've written to him 3 times. Marcus, each letter returned unopened." That stopped him short. "He's just worried?" "No, he's ashamed. His daughter chose an Apache warrior over a Boston banker. The scandal must be unbearable." Clara's voice held more sadness than bitterness. "But I found something here I never had there. Purpose, respect, love." With a savage who probably has 3 other wives. He has no other wives. Apache men can take multiple wives. Yes, but many choose not to. Taza loved his first wife deeply. He mourned her properly, and now he loves me. She met the colonel's eyes steadily. "Can you say the same about most white marriages? How many officers' wives have you seen drowning in laudanum because their husbands keep mistresses?" Webb flushed. "That's different." "Is it?" Clara challenged. "Tell me, Marcus, what awaits me if I return? Scandal? Whispers? Being shuttled off to some aunt in another state until the shame dies down? Or worse, being forced to marry quickly to anyone who'll have me, just to restore the family honor?" The colonel was silent, unable to deny the truth of her words. Clara pressed on. "Here, I teach children who hunger for knowledge. I'm learning medicine from women who've kept their people healthy for generations. I have a husband who sees me as an equal partner, not property. Why would I leave that for a cage, no matter how gilded?" "You can't seriously mean to spend your life among these people," Webb said, but his protest sounded weaker. I am." Clara straightened her shoulders. "So you have a choice. Marcus, you can try to take me by force and start a bloodbath that will echo through the territory for years. Or you can return to Fort Buchanan and report that Clara Whitmore died in that bandit attack. Let me be dead to that world, since it wants no part of who I've become." The colonel stared at her for a long moment. "You're asking me to lie to your father. I'm asking you to prevent a war," Clara corrected, "and to respect my choice, even if you don't understand it." Webb looked back at the village, at the warriors ready to die defending it, at the women and children watching fearfully. Then he looked at Clara, really looked at her. Whatever he saw in her face made him sigh deeply. "I could be court-martialed for this," he muttered. "You could be remembered as the officer who chose wisdom over regulations." Clara countered. Another long silence. Finally, Webb spoke. "I'll need proof you're alive and well. A letter, in your hand, stating you're here by choice, for my own conscience, if nothing else." "Of course," Clara agreed quickly. "I'll write it now." She hurried back to the village, ignoring the questions in Taza's eyes, and retrieved paper and pencil from her teaching supplies. In clear, firm strokes, she wrote, "To whom it may concern, I, Clara Elizabeth Whitmore, being of sound mind and body, do hereby state that I remain with the Apache people of my own free will. I have taken a husband according to their customs and have found purpose teaching their children. I ask that no further attempts be made to rescue me, as I am neither prisoner nor in need of saving. I regret any pain my choice may cause, but I have found my calling here among these people. Please respect my decision and allow me to live in peace. Clara Whitmore Redhawk." She dated it and returned to Colonel Webb, who read it twice before folding it carefully and placing it in his jacket. "I'll tell them you were killed in a subsequent Apache raid," he said quietly. "That we found evidence but no body. It will be easier for your father to bear than the truth." "Thank you," Clara said, meaning it. "You're a good man." "Marcus, I hope I am," he replied heavily. "God forgive me, I hope I am." He looked at her one last time. "Be happy, Clara. If you've thrown away everything for this life, at least be happy in it." "I am," she assured him, "more than I ever dreamed possible." Colonel Webb mounted his horse and gave the order to withdraw. as the cavalry column disappeared into the dust. Clara felt Taza's hand slip into hers. "You could have gone," he said quietly. "Return to your old life." Clara turned to face him, seeing the fear he'd hidden behind his warrior's mask. "My old life ended the day I saved you. This is my life now. You are my life." He pulled her against him, heedless of the watching village. "When I saw those soldiers, I thought—" "I know," she whispered. "But I'm here. I'm staying forever, if you'll have me that long." "Forever isn't long enough," he murmured into her hair. That evening, the village celebrated. The threat had passed without bloodshed, and Clara's choice to stay, even when offered freedom, had silenced her last critics. Even Black Wolf offered her a nod of genuine respect, as Clara sat by the fire, surrounded by her students and their families. She thought about Colonel Webb riding back to Fort Buchanan with her letter. Soon, Clara Whitmore would be officially dead, a casualty of the harsh frontier. But Clara Redhawk would live on, teaching and learning, loving and being loved, in a hidden valley where two worlds met and made something new. The stars emerged one by one above the canyon walls, and Clara smiled. She'd made her choice with eyes wide open, knowing the price, and she'd pay it again, 1,000 times over, for the life she'd found here in the heart of Apache country. Tomorrow there would be lessons to teach, herbs to gather, stories to learn. Tonight, there was Taza's warmth beside her, the children's laughter, the elders' approving nods. Tonight, there was home. 6 months had passed since Colonel Webb's visit. Clara Whitmore was now officially dead, mourned in Boston society as a tragic casualty of frontier violence. But Clara Redhawk lived on, her days filled with purpose and belonging she'd never imagined possible. The autumn air carried a chill as Clara made her way through Willow Creek, the small frontier town she'd originally intended to reach. She wore a simple calico dress and bonnet that Mourning Dove had helped her fashion, her appearance deliberately unremarkable. It was dangerous for her to be here, but necessity had driven her from the safety of the hidden valley. News had reached them 3 days ago. The Apache village was under siege, not by soldiers, but by something far worse: hunger. An early frost had destroyed much of their stored food, and game had become scarce, driven away by increased military patrols. The children were beginning to show signs of malnutrition, their bright eyes dulling with hunger. Clara had made her decision immediately. She had money, an inheritance from her grandmother that her father couldn't touch, sitting in a bank in Tucson. Money that could buy supplies, food, medicine. But to access it, she had to risk entering town, where someone might recognize the supposedly dead Miss Whitmore. The bank was a modest adobe building on Main Street. Clara kept her head down, affecting a slight limp to change her gait. Inside, she presented the forged documents Taza's brother, Samuel Crowfeather, educated at an Eastern school before returning to the tribe, had helped her prepare. To the bank. She was Mrs. Mary Sullivan, recent widow, withdrawing funds to return east. "Terrible loss, ma'am," the clerk said sympathetically. Counting out the bills, "The frontier's no place for a woman alone." "Indeed," Clara murmured, accepting the money with trembling hands. So far, so good. She divided her purchases among several stores to avoid suspicion. Flour, cornmeal, beans, salt pork, coffee, sugar, medical supplies, laudanum, bandages, quinine, blankets for the coming winter, seeds for next year's planting. Everything paid for in cash, loaded onto a wagon she'd hired from a Mexican trader who asked no questions. It was at the final store, purchasing ammunition, that disaster struck. "Clara Whitmore?" She froze, recognizing the voice before she turned. Mrs. Adelaide Morrison, wife of a cavalry captain, stood behind her. They'd met briefly at Fort Buchanan before Clara's supposed death. "I'm sorry," Clara said carefully, affecting a slight accent. "You must be mistaken, ma'am." But Adelaide's eyes were sharp with recognition. "No, I'm quite certain. We were told you were killed, but—" Her gaze took in Clara's simple dress, her sun-darkened skin, the ammunition in her hands. Understanding dawned, followed quickly by horror. "Dear God, the rumors were true. You're living with them. With the savages." Clara straightened, abandoning pretense. "They're not savages, Adelaide. They're people, just like us." "People?" Adelaide's voice rose shrilly. "They're heathens, murderers, and you—" She backed away as if Clara carried disease. "You're their what? Their white squaw?" "I'm a teacher," Clara said quietly, "and a wife. And I'm trying to keep children from starving to death. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll tell everyone," Adelaide threatened. "The garrison, the town council, they'll come for you." Clara met her gaze steadily. "A widow named Mary Sullivan made purchases today. Clara Whitmore is dead, killed by Apache raiders 6 months ago. Colonel Webb filed the report himself. Which story do you think people will believe?" Adelaide's face flushed. "You can't threaten me." "I'm not threatening anyone," Clara interrupted. "I'm simply pointing out facts. Clara Whitmore's death brought peace to this valley. Her resurrection would bring only bloodshed. Is your moral outrage worth the lives it would cost? The children, white and Apache, who would die in the fighting." The two women stared at each other across an unbridgeable chasm. Finally, Adelaide looked away. "You're damned," she whispered. "Living in sin with those creatures. God will punish you." "Perhaps," Clara agreed. "But not today, and not by your hand." She left Adelaide standing there and completed her purchases with hands that barely shook. The Mexican trader helped her load the final supplies, and soon they were rolling out of town, Clara's heart not slowing until Willow Creek disappeared behind them. 2 days later, they reached the meeting point where Taza waited with pack horses. His relief at seeing her safe was palpable, though he maintained his warrior's composure in front of the trader. "Any trouble?" he asked once they were alone, transferring supplies to the pack animals. "Some," Clara admitted, telling him about Adelaide. "But I don't think she'll speak of it. The scandal would touch her too, having known me before." Taza's jaw tightened. "You took too great a risk." "Our children were hungry," Clara said simply. "What choice did I have?" He pulled her against him, his embrace fierce. "There are always choices. Promise me, no more trips to town. Not alone." "I promise," Clara said, though they both knew she would break that promise if necessity demanded it. The return to the village was triumphant. Women wept with relief as food was distributed. Children laughed again as their bellies filled. The medicine woman carefully portioned out the medical supplies, nodding approval at Clara's selections. That night, Crowfeather called Clara before the council. She knelt before the elders, nervous about this formal summons. Had someone learned of her encounter with Adelaide? Were there consequences she hadn't foreseen? But Crowfeather's words surprised her. "Clara Redhawk," he said, speaking slowly so she could follow the Apache, "you have walked far from your people to help ours. You risked discovery and capture to feed our children. This is not the action of an outsider, but of a true daughter of the tribe." He lifted a beautifully beaded medallion from around his neck, the symbol of formal adoption into the clan. "If you will accept it, we offer you full membership in the Red Hawk clan, not just as Taza's wife, but as our daughter, our sister, with all the rights and responsibilities that brings." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She understood the magnitude of this offer. Few whites had ever been formally adopted into Apache bands. It meant she would truly belong, no longer a guest but family. "I accept with honor," she managed to say. The ceremony was simple but profound. Sacred smoke was wafted over her. Her Apache name was spoken aloud. "She who teaches with patience." The medallion was placed around her neck by Crowfeather himself. Women who had once watched her with suspicion now embraced her as sister. Later, as she and Taza lay in their wickiup, Clara fingered the medallion in wonder. "I never expected this," she whispered. "You earned it," Taza said firmly. "Not through the trial alone, but through every day since. Teaching our children, learning our ways, risking yourself for our people. You are Apache in your heart." "Adelaide Morrison called me a white squaw," Clara said, the hurt finally surfacing. Said I was damned. Taza rose on one elbow to look at her. Do you believe her? Clara considered. No. How can love be damnation? How can feeding hungry children be sin? If God condemns me for the choices I've made, then I'll accept that judgment. But I don't believe he will. Your God and our spirits are not so different, Taza said. Both honor sacrifice for others. Both value love over law. You walk in balance. Clara, that is holy in any faith. The next morning, Clara returned to her teaching with renewed purpose. Little Fox could now read simple sentences. Other children were beginning to write their names. But more importantly, they were learning to bridge two worlds, just as she was. She thought of Adelaide Morrison, trapped in her rigid certainties, seeing only savages where Clara saw family. She thought of her father in Boston, mourning a daughter who'd never really existed while the real Clara thrived in ways he couldn't imagine. The medallion rested warm against her chest as she drew letters in the dirt, surrounded by eager faces. She who teaches with patience. It was a good name, a true name, better than Clara Whitmore had ever been. Who can tell me what this word says? She asked, writing home in clear letters. Every hand shot up, voices calling out in English and Apache. Clara smiled, her heart full. She was home indeed, in ways that went deeper than blood or birth. She was Apache by choice, teacher by calling, wife by love. And despite Adelaide's predictions, she felt blessed beyond measure. The traditional Apache marriage ceremony took place on a crisp morning when the cottonwoods blazed golden along the creek. Though Clara and Taza had lived as husband and wife for nearly a year, the formal ritual before the entire tribe would cement their union in the eyes of all, both Apache and the few white traders who occasionally visited the valley. Clara stood in the wedding lodge, surrounded by the women who had become her sisters. Mourning Dove adjusted the elaborate ceremonial dress, white doeskin adorned with hundreds of tiny shells that chimed softly with each movement. The intricate beadwork had taken months to complete, with every woman in the clan contributing their finest work. You shake like leaf, Mourning Dove observed. Not unkindly. Nervous? Terrified. Clara admitted, what if I make mistakes in the ceremony? Young Sparrow, once suspicious but now a close friend, laughed. You walk the cliff path without spilling water. This is nothing compared to that. The medicine woman entered, carrying the sacred items for the blessing. She studied Clara with those ancient eyes that seemed to see through flesh to spirit. Today you become fully one with us, she said in her careful English. No more looking back to world you left, only forward. You understand? Yes, grandmother, Clara said, using the respectful term for an elder. My past is gone, my future is here. The ceremony began at noon when the sun stood directly overhead, blessing the union with its full power. The entire tribe gathered in a great circle, with Crowfeather and the other elders at the cardinal points. Taza waited at the center, magnificent in his ceremonial regalia, eagle feathers in his hair, his chest painted with sacred symbols, wearing the traditional wedding shirt decorated with porcupine quills. As drums began their steady heartbeat rhythm, Clara emerged from the lodge. A collective murmur of approval rose from the assembled people. Even Black Wolf, who had challenged her so fiercely months ago, nodded his respect. The ceremony itself was elaborate, involving multiple rituals Clara had practiced for weeks. First came the blessing of the four directions, calling upon the spirits of earth and sky to witness their union. Then, the exchange of gifts. Clara presented Taza with a war shirt she'd decorated with beads and quills under Mourning Dove's tutelage, while he gave her a necklace of turquoise and silver that had belonged to his grandmother. The most moving moment came when they stood together beneath a blanket held by the elders, symbolizing their new life as one unit. Crowfeather spoke the ancient words that bound them not just in this life, but for all eternity. Their spirits intertwined like smoke rising from a shared fire. Now you must speak your hearts. Crowfeather instructed, so all may witness the truth of your joining. Taza spoke first, his voice carrying clearly across the silent gathering. When my first wife died, I thought my heart was buried with her. I lived but did not feel. I fought but found no purpose. Then the Spirit sent me a teacher, not just of letters and words, but of how to live again. Clara gave me back my life twice. Once when she saved my body from bullets. Again when she saved my spirit from darkness. I pledge before all that I will cherish her as the morning cherishes the sun, as the earth cherishes the rain, forever and beyond. Clara's throat was tight with emotion as she spoke her own vows. I came to this land to teach, but became the student. I thought I knew about courage until I saw your warriors face impossible odds. I thought I knew about strength until I saw your women hold families together through loss and hardship. I thought I knew about love until Taza showed me it could bridge any divide. I pledge before all that I will stand beside him through whatever comes, war or peace, plenty or hunger, joy or sorrow. His people are my people. His path is my path. Today and all days to come. The crowd erupted in celebration. Ululation from the women, war cries from the men, laughter from the children. The wedding feast began. With food Clara had helped purchase filling every belly. There was dancing late into the night, stories told around the great fire, blessings spoken by elders who remembered when the Apache roamed free across all the Southwest. As the celebration continued, Clara found a moment to slip away, needing air and quiet. She climbed to a rocky outcrop overlooking the village, the same place where she'd often come to think during her early days here. The moon was rising, painting the canyon walls silver. She wasn't surprised when Taza found her there. He moved silently as always, but she'd learned to sense his presence like a change in the air pressure before a storm. "Too much noise?" he asked, settling beside her. "Just thinking," Clara said. "A year ago, I was Clara Whitmore, Boston schoolteacher, heading to a simple teaching post. Now I'm Clara Redhawk, adopted Apache, teaching children to walk between two worlds. Sometimes the change takes my breath away." "Do you regret?" There was vulnerability in the question. Clara turned to face him fully. "Never, not for one moment. Even when it's hard, even when I miss things from my old life, books, concerts, my mother's grave. I never regret. How could I? You've given me something I never had there. You've given me purpose that matters, love that strengthens rather than constrains, a family that chose me as much as I chose them." Taza pulled her against him, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching their village below. The celebration was winding down, families drifting back to their wickiups, fires banking to glowing coals. "There's something else," Clara said eventually. "Something I've been waiting to tell you until today." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. "By spring, there will be a new voice in our wickiup. The medicine woman confirmed it yesterday." Taza went absolutely still, his hand spreading across her stomach as if he could feel the tiny life growing there. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "You carry our child?" "I do," Clara confirmed, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Are you happy?" For answer, he kissed her deeply, pouring all his joy and wonder and love into the connection. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "I thought my line would die with me," he said, "after Singing River and our unborn child were lost. I thought the spirits had decreed it, but you—" He shook his head in wonder. "You restore everything I thought gone forever." They returned to the village hand in hand, slipping into their wickiup as dawn approached. The wedding gifts were piled inside: blankets, pottery, beaded goods, practical items for building their household. But the greatest gift was the life growing within Clara, the bridge between two peoples made flesh. As they lay together on their wedding robes, Taza's hand protective over her belly, Clara sent up a prayer of gratitude. She'd lost one life, but gained another immeasurably richer. She'd traded the narrow confines of proper society for the vast freedom of the frontier. She'd exchanged a future of quiet desperation for one of purpose and passion. "What shall we name the child?" Taza asked softly. "If it's a boy, Samuel, after your brother," Clara said. He's done so much for us. If a girl, she considered. Hope, because that's what she'll represent. Hope, Taza repeated. Yes, in any language, that's what our children will be. Outside, the sun was rising over the canyon walls, painting the rocks in shades of rose and gold. A new day in their life together, sanctified now by ceremony and blessed by the promise of new life. Clara closed her eyes, feeling Taza's heartbeat beneath her palm, their child's future heartbeat below her own. She who teaches with patience had found her true classroom not in a frontier schoolhouse, but in this hidden valley, where every day brought lessons in courage, resilience, and the power of love to overcome any obstacle. The greatest adventure of her life was just beginning. In the years to come, Clara would establish a school that taught both Apache and English ways, preparing a generation for the changes sweeping the West. She would bear 3 children who moved easily between worlds, as comfortable in Boston parlors as around Apache campfires. She would write letters to newspapers back east, challenging stereotypes and advocating for native rights with the passion of one who truly understood both sides. But all of that lay ahead. For now, there was only this perfect moment. 2 souls made one, a new life beginning, and the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Clara Redhawk slept peacefully in her husband's arms as the Apache village awakened around them, ready for whatever challenges and joys the new day might bring. Thank you all for listening to this tale of love and courage in the Old West. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to hear your thoughts on Clara and Taza's story in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey through the Arizona territory, please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories that bring the frontier to life. What did you think of Clara's choice? Could you have left everything behind for love? Share your thoughts. I read every comment.